Today on The Public Interest with David Stokes, we're talking with Representative Dottie Bailey for a preview of the 2020 legislative session and what's happening in West County. Welcome to The Public Interest with David Stokes. I'm David Stokes. Thank you for joining us this October. You can see the Halloween decorations behind me. We're talking with Representative Dottie Bailey, who represents the 110th State Rep District in St. Louis County, with just a little bit of Franklin County as well.
Yep.
She's going to be joining us today. She is joining us today to talk about the upcoming legislative session and what's happening in her district in West County and what she's interested in doing for the state in her term in office. Representative Bailey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So I like the story of how you ran for office. I like sort of, I guess old-fashioned probably isn't really the right term, but stories of people who hadn't really, I don't want to take your story, but if you don't mind telling for me, you hadn't really planned.
Sure,
you hadn't spent a lot of time in your life planning to run for office. It just sort of came up as an opportunity, and you decided to work real hard at it, and you won. So
right, so for years, I've been politically active here and there. It's kind of like my side hobby, if you will. As part of the St. Louis Tea Party Coalition, and kind of hung out with all those guys and gals, and we did a bunch of fun stuff, a bunch of meaningful things. We lost a bunch of elections. We won a bunch of elections. We probably lost more than we won. So it was a good education. And was it last March? I was sitting on my couch and my phone rang, and it was my committee woman, and she said, "Oh no, our incumbent Kirk Matthews, who's wonderful, couldn't run again." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right. Well, we got to find somebody." She's like, "Well, what about you?" And I'm like, "What?" And I did. I laughed, and then we talked a little bit about it more, and I'm like, okay, hold on, let me think about this. So long story short, I accepted, and but I got to say, it has been, you can tell the difference between maybe a career politician or somebody who's wanted to do this from me. And I say this not as a dig, but my principles are my principles, and I know where I stand on most issues. Now, there's some issues I didn't, they're smaller ones outside of the norm. But I don't really have to waver because I've been doing it for 20 years. And, as an activist, we're sometimes just harder headed, if you will. But I'm also very willing to listen. And here's the one key. I know that I don't know everything, so I like to listen to everybody's side. And I have been on the floor going, I'm going to go vote no on this, and then hear it and go, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know these little things. So. But I get it. That's what our founders called us to do is, regular people. I was a banker, bankers and farmers and so on and so forth. You go, you do your term, and then you go back home and go back and live your life. And so when she did ask me to run, I was like, But then over the years, I've thought, how many people have I asked to run for office? And so I thought, okay, I got to put my money where my mouth is. And
so how do you think that jives with the clear benefits of learning? The longer you're there in Jefferson City, as you said, you don't know everything. Mm-hmm. The longer you're there in Jefferson City, you learn more about complex issues and you learn more about the legislative process. So that trade-off through term limits.
Yes.
I mean, how do you describe the trade-off, and what are some improvements you think we could make to term limits in Missouri?
Okay. In the Missouri State House, the max is 8. That's not long enough, because of the institutional knowledge that you gain year after year after year. An improvement would be 12 to 16 year max, because 8 by year 6, already right now I'm thinking, okay, I've got 7 years to do the things that I want to do for my district. That's not a long time. As we know, kids grow up so quick.
Right, absolutely.
10 years passes, but this is only 8 years. And so it's been a detriment because, in me, Tea Party girl, term limits, we've always screamed about that. But once you're there, you realize this short term, 8 years, it puts the institutional knowledge back into the bureaucrats and the lobbyists. So when I have questions, I can't ask a House rep that's been there 20 years or 15 years. I have to ask the guy that's only been there 3 years. Now, we all have learned quickly, and they still might not know. So sometimes I have to go ask one of the bureaucrats or one of the lobbyists, which aren't bad people, don't get me wrong, but they have their own self-interest. So it takes a lot of shuffling and running around, but I mean, we get it done. It's just run as time crunch. I always feel like, which is fine, and I've always worked like that anyway, but 12 to 16 years, if we could ever extend that.
I guess it was put out there a few years ago, the idea that 16 years total, not 8 in either body. Like, if you want to stay in the House for 16 years,
I agree.
And then you can't go, and then you can't run to the Senate.
I agree. I think that would be great.
I think that would be an improvement as well.
Yeah, it's a fast learning curve anyway. But to get anything accomplished, I mean, there's so many guys terming out after next year that I know have so much knowledge on, say, the foundation formula. I want them to be able to download all that information into my head. Where I'm sorry to see him go, because I mean, he's just a wealth of knowledge, and so we all kind of have our specialties, and losing a person here and there that have that that great knowledge and be able to decipher and regurgitate that information, it's hard to bring it all in and start over again.
So tell me about Bryce's Law, which is a bill you introduced to renew last year.
To renew, yeah. So it was set to sunset.
What is Bryce's Law about?
Yeah, so to me it was a law that was set aside for kiddos with autism and other disabilities, that would give them a choice of what school to go to, because some schools just aren't set up. Some schools don't have a special school district. Some schools, especially the smaller schools, don't have a great a resource room or what have you. And so,
to interject, but you said your district, mostly St. Louis County, has the special school district.
Absolutely.
But Franklin County, part of your district, does not.
Right.
So there's, among your constituents, you've got that, that breakdown right there.
Yes, exactly. So, so people are like, oh, well, blah, blah. Okay, my kids are in Rockwood School District, and, if they need it, they get that service. However, people are like, well, but no, it's about statewide. I represent the whole state as well. But yeah, the kiddos in Franklin County, they don't get a choice. Now, not to say that their programs aren't good, but still, these kiddos that maybe really need a choice because there's some learning disabilities there, it would have given them their funding to go to whatever school they chose. And it didn't get out of committee. It didn't get out of committee. And it's such a heart-wrenching thing for me, because the educational establishment, they're always like, oh, we're here for the kids. We want the best thing for the kids. Well, okay, if this child doesn't fit this little box here, then there's 100 other boxes out there that would be a better fit. Couldn't we release them to go where they can get the best opportunities for their learning capabilities? And it's just such a heartbreaking thing. And that's my frustration with government most of the time. We don't do the right thing.
Now, is Bryce's Law narrowly focused just to kids with autism and other tightly defined learning disabilities?
It wasn't going to give, and this was a hard part too. I had many people coming to me, well, can you add this and can you add that? But I kept it in the same vein that it was introduced in 2010. And so that's why we are trying to redo the sunset, push the sunset out further to actually get some funding in there, because it's been there 8 years or so, but no funding's been put in it to make it actually work. And so it's disappointing. So I'm looking at a couple different things to reintroduce. Don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but those kids are always on my heart. And I think it's a shame that the state of Missouri, that we can't say, all right, well, these kiddos, they're not all one size fits all. Let's help them and let them move to a different school that would best suit their needs.
So sticking in the area of kids, and you're considering doing something with student data accountability in the next section.
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
So in our technological age,
and I'm going to drink some more wine.
Sure, yeah. In this tech age that we're in, not all. A lot of the students have, Google Classroom, Google this, Google that. Well, we know what Google does. Google takes all of our information, and so I've been hearing about this data collection since 2010, when Common Core came in the middle of the night, and we signed off, and oh, it was great. No, and it wasn't great. The legislature didn't get to vote on it, but anyway, it was there. That's when all this data collection started to come around. And so as I'm like going through all these laws, I'm looking at federal laws, and I started reading FERPA one day, and I'm like, okay, well, all right. So FERPA is the, what is that? The law. You can't share these data subsets unless, and I'm going to screw up the acronym, but you can't share these data subsets with only people that are employed with that school and contractors or vendors. So, so data points like your name, your address, your social security number, your phone number, you know, blah, blah, so many data sets. So if you opt out of that, okay, you think, okay, my data's safe. No, it's actually not, because anybody that's employed with that school district or does work contracting or as a vendor of them has access to that. So I read that one day and I'm like, okay, so this really doesn't protect any data. It really doesn't. It just kind of keeps their picture, the student's picture, off of, you know, a Google, a shot or something that goes out on the internet, you know, a little picture or what have you. So I started thinking about this, and I'm like, well, gosh, there's nothing really to protect or for the parents to know. And so I read FERPA even further. And if I want to get to my kiddos' collected data that they've been collecting since whatever year, 2010, 2009, I have to write FERPA in the school district. I have to wait 45 days, and God knows if I'll ever really get it. So this act would put accessibility, because if Google and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has all the information on my kiddos, shouldn't I have access to it? So, I mean, it's the most bizarre thing to me. And I don't know why this didn't hit me last session, but, you know, things come about. But so this will give me access, parents, not me, access, parents access. There would be several steps put in place that would be overseen by a separate board, if you will, or a group of stakeholders instead of DESE or Google or the vendors or whomever. So it's a lot of parental rights, if you will. Because right now, I don't know what's being shared. I don't even know sometimes. You know, I'm not told what, you know, medical information, everything is where it's going. We have no idea. So if it's going, if you know, it's going into the ether and going out to all these places, shouldn't I know where it's going? So it does a lot of things, but that's the main kind of crux of the whole piece of legislation. I just think it's fair. What's good for DESE should be good for mom and dad. So it'll be interesting.
Well, good luck on that, because I think that's very important.
I agree, yeah.
One thing that your district has faced, your area has faced in the last 5 years or so, is a lot of flooding. I mean, the Merrimack River has. You have the Merrimack River, correct? At least the north bank of it.
Yep.
Obviously, that's had three, probably after this spring, three of its largest floods ever in the past 5 years. So last year, Senator Koenig, who was the state senator for part of your district, or is it all Senator?
No, so Senator Schatz has most of it, and then Koenig comes in the Ellisville area. Mm-hmm.
Well, he had a bill that got out of the Senate unanimously to limit the use of tax subsidies, TIF specifically, in the floodplain. It passed the Senate and got killed in the House. Do you have any thoughts on whether, after this latest round of massive flooding, with Missourians hopefully still attuned to the damage that floodplain development can do? Do you think there's hope for that bill this session in the House?
I think so. I mean, so obviously TIFs, tax credits, it's always a hot issue, right? And now you add the floods. As soon as we left session in May, I mean, or before that, we started having all these floods. And so it all kind of goes like this. But I want to backtrack before we get to that piece. Since the Obama era, I can even say before that, the Army Corps of Engineers, and I've checked, because somebody told me this, and I'm like, nah, that's not true. And I went and checked. He said, you know, years ago, the Army Corps of Engineers, their first priority was flood prevention, right? But it's not anymore. It's protect the endangered species and the fish and the wildlife, and then protecting the floodplains here. So I'm like, oh, interesting. So he was right. So I started going through, and it really is. And obviously, I mean, we saw with the Missouri River this year, massive issues. So, and Congressman Graves has been really pushing back on the Army Corps of Engineers. And the Army Corps is interesting because their funding isn't really in control of Congress. it's kind of like the CFPB to me. It's almost unfettered. They do what they want, right? So I know Congressman Graves had a terrible time, and Missouri and all its inlet, all its other rivers that run into it, they had a ton of flooding this year because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Instead, they're protecting all the other things. So farmers, everybody's upset. But to get back to your issue, yeah, I mean, so if we're going to do tax increment financing in a floodplain, and now we know, so that's why I brought up the Army Corps of Engineers. If we know that flood prevention is not our top tier, their top tier, and then we spend a bunch of money and gives all this tax increment financing to all the and so we kind of know it's going to flood. Is it not a waste? So I mean it's twofold to me. We've got this issue. Why are we going to give a TIF here when we know it? So I hope it's brought up again, and it's something that definitely needs to be curbed, if you will. But it's quite an issue. I mean, the flooding thing. I don't know. I know Senator Hawley introduced a bill in May that would bring back the flood prevention back to the #1 spot in the Army Corps of Engineers. Now, will that pass? I don't know. And Graves has been doing that bill since 2015. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it's frustrating because people in my district have been hurt. Ours is from the Mississippi, and it runs, but the overflow from the Missouri goes into the Mississippi, and it's just a big mess. And so in the last 12 years or so, it's like, well, why is it, everybody's, oh, it's climate change. Well, not really. We've got some, flood prevention that's not being done where it was years before that.
Now, bear in mind, I don't want those bills to pass.
Okay.
So, but to have this conversation,
yeah, no, it's good.
It's the Corps, having looked at, spends just a pittance on in their total budget. I shouldn't say it's a pittance, $1 million here, $1 million there. Pretty soon you're talking real money. So, but as a percentage of its budget, it's still a very small amount for restoration and habitat restoration and wildlife restoration. And I would disagree with those in D.C. who claim that the Corps has lost sight of its flood prevention mission. They still are. I'd like to see them go even further towards more natural floodplain solutions. It's not that we all want better flood protection.
Right.
And certainly some people may have some frustration with the Corps, but I would say that the worst abusers of all this are your local levee districts. The ones that view themselves as real estate developers first and levee districts second, like we've seen throughout the St. Louis region. Sure. And I do think that's the worst abuse, and I think that the Corps as well should be encouraged to go into as much of a natural floodplain solution benefit as it can, because just building levees just makes the next flood worse. So many people, and the Corps would disagree with me on this, but so many people along the Merrimack, including in your district, have said, look, it never used to flood. Then they built that levee on Valley Park, and now it floods all the time here.
Right, and that is true, because you levee it here. Well, water's got to go somewhere, and that's very true. That came down, and now we're going to try to levee. Where's it going to go next? I mean, it happens over and over, but we can agree to disagree. But on the subsidy part, I think there's an
agreement part.
Yes,
that if people are concerned about violating property rights by saying you can't develop something there,
right,
that at least you can find that area of agreement to say taxpayers aren't going to subsidize it.
Right.
And if you want to do it, you're going to do it on your own dime as much as possible.
I do agree with that.
And sense, since the vast majority of floodplain development in this region is tax subsidized, that can have a major effect.
Right.
Because we've seen, you mentioned at the start there that tax subsidies are always a hot topic. So here we are, just blocks from the
trolley,
the western terminus point.
Is that what you're going to say?
Right. Of the Loop Trolley. Here we have, I think the Loop is on our little sign right there. This is University City, and
yes.
And what a great example of a project that, if it wasn't for the tax subsidies, it wouldn't. It was all
So that was a
subsidized.
TDD, correct?
I think it was both the TDD
And
and,
a
the CID.
yeah, so-
and then a lot of federal money too.
Right.
So that, I think they had both the TDD and the SID. Maybe it's just one of the two. But that's where all their local money wasn't any private money, and there might have been a tiny amount of private money in it. It was the local match of the federal funding was just local tax subsidies, all for something that clearly
is a dumpster fire.
I mean, any market analysis at all would have, any real market analysis would have shown that there is no market for this.
No, it's a very strange thing. So with a TDD, tax or transportation development district, I get this all. TDD, really interesting. You know how those come about?
There's no vote. They're just signed on by property owners.
Yeah.
Generally.
So
it's basically the same with SID. So
yeah,
if it's actually a SID instead of a TDD, the point. It's just your point will stand here.
Yeah. In the 90s, I guess, whenever I looked at the old legislation, because we have the Hancock Amendment. You're going to pass a tax, you got to put it on the ballot for everybody, right? So whoever was the genius on the TDD is like, okay, well, we'll draw our own district. So one of the things you need is real estate in that district. So if so-and-so and Bobby Joe and Mary Sue live in this district and they just draw this tiny little district, and they're the voters on that TDD, and that's it.
Or better yet, there's none at all.
There's none at all, and there's no oversight, and there's no sunset. Interesting. So I've been reading about all this. So the Loop Trolley is such a hoot to me. You know, I say that not a hoot because it's our taxpayers have paid for it that actually didn't get to vote on it, but it's a hoot that it's just such a dumpster fire, and then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. You know, and here's my thought. Why did they have to do the tracks? Why can't make it a trolley but put it on wheels so it could go all around so like you said, it wasn't a fit.
Those do exist. I mean, they've been I've been, I think it was Rapid City, South Dakota, where I went on that exactly, was there a decade ago, probably longer, for a wedding, and they've got their trolley rolling down the main street in Rapid City, South Dakota, but it's just a trolley on
wheels. Yeah, I mean, we all love a trolley, but we're not San Francisco, right? I mean, so it's just, so these transportation development districts are a little bit dangerous in my opinion, because some gung-ho person that wanted to do this trolley thing was like, okay, and he read the law and he's like, all right, it's doable, and by law it was doable, but yet the taxpayers got to eat all the costs. It's a lose-lose for everyone, especially the taxpayer, and now they want another $700,000 to keep it going. So interesting.
But the problem repeats itself constantly throughout the region, and now they have the plan in Maryland Heights, which they're coming forward with a huge giant TIF to pave over thousands of acres of farmland and floodplain in Maryland Heights, and they're going to do it with a TIF and a TDD and a CID. It's just tax subsidy upon tax subsidy upon tax subsidy. That's all to do something that will in the end succeed in Maryland Heights, at least, only in making the next flooding situation worse.
Right.
And then,
they're going to push it more out to us. It's like,
they'll push it back to the Missouri River, because that is the plan. They will pump out in the next flooding situation, pump the water out to the Missouri, back it up. So it will back up then to the first place that isn't protected by a levee. And the answer to that is not then to build every place a new levee. Because, as I say over and over and over again, if you think you can give everybody the 500-year levee to protect them, all you'll do is create the 600-year flood.
Right, exactly.
The water is going to go somewhere.
Yeah, I just, if anybody could do anything privately with their own money and not have the government and the taxpayers pay for your crazy ideas that usually end up in a dumpster fire, it would be great. When somebody says, yeah, we're going to do a nonprofit or private money, I'm like, hallelujah. The government, I have on my Twitter, the government is not your fairy godmother, and I get a lot of crap for that, but it's not. It's like, oh, I want this. Well, government, and then come pass a law and you get it done. And it's like, before the Department of Transportation, the federal, and before it was at 1912. Before then, we all did our own roads. I mean, the farmers and the people that had commerce going back and forth. Well, they figured it out. And I'm not saying let's go back to that, but we're not resourceful anymore. Right. We want government to do every single thing for us from cradle to grave, and we haven't become innovative or anything beyond that because, well, if government can't do it, then we can't, So it's just, I just hope some people change that theory and go the other way.
But in fairness, we do like the interstate highway system.
Oh, of course. No, of course. And don't get me wrong.
Tolling and gas taxes
yes.
are pretty good ways, user fees to pay for
Right.
things.
No, absolutely. I'm just saying, before we had all this, the government, we still functioned, We weren't like, crawling in a ball. We don't have a government, so.
Representative Bailey, before we wrap up, what do you think the single biggest issue in the next legislative session is going to be?
Oh, well.
Single biggest.
Single biggest.
What's the biggest fight we have upcoming?
It's either going to be, and just because it depends, by the time we actually get there, if it's all these firearm type laws that, the progressives want to put on us, that'll be a fight. Actually, we won't put it in committee because we have supermajority. That is going to, we're going to get an onslaught of firearm bills that will gross in a high number. But, we did.
What do you think is going to be the single biggest fight over something that has a real chance of passing?
Probably Cleaner Missouri. So we had Clean Missouri last year. And so the misnomer about Clean Missouri was, it's, we get all these financial contributions from lobbyists, and that's how they sold it. But it was really about the demographer on how they're going to draw the districts. So right now we have a bipartisan group that does that. This law that was passed last session, it was an IP ballot. It was on the ballot so we have one person that's going to draw the districts. Now, you and I both know, really, there's no nonpartisan person on earth, especially this day and age. So that one person is going to draw districts. So Cleaner Missouri will totally get rid of financial gifts to politicians, and we're going to change that demographer back to the bipartisan group.
It was very frustrating talking about Clean Missouri and that vote for the build up to it, with all the talk about how we have to take that Missouri legislators somehow drew their own lines. And that was said over and over and over, gerrymandering districts. Yet it had been, for decades, it had always been done by an either nonpartisan appointed panel, which almost always failed, and then it went to a panel of judges.
Right.
So judges had drawn the state legislative lines for decades and decades, yet you heard over and over that the House and Senate were drawing their own gerrymandered districts, which only applied to the congressional districts. Those were the only ones drawn by the politicians. And Clean Missouri, correct me if I'm wrong, but that does not apply to the congressional districts.
Correct.
Because
That's
it would
correct.
would violate federal law
Yes.
on dealing with how you reapportion.
Yes.
So they left that out. So the only thing it actually applied to, they left off the bill. That was very frustrating.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And so they can't win at the ballot box. So what do? You change your rules, right? So, the progressive, they're trying this in state by state, and I forget what states, but they want us to be Cook County. Cook County runs Illinois. Cook County has districts that look like this. They look like little spiders or spider webs. So, a district that would hit the city. So let's say, for instance, here, hit the city, would run out to maybe my district. Well, that's 40 miles. My constituency, they know me. They see me at the grocery store. If I have a district like that, well, I won't know my constituents. They won't know me. They're like, who's this girl? So it's a really dangerous thing. So, yeah, to me, it's a big thing because, in a lot of the Democrats, they agree with me because their constituency wouldn't be the same. So it's a really bizarre thing. And, I could be wrong. It could be completely different, when we actually get in session, and who knows. Like last year, the life bill, that wasn't something we knew we were like, okay, well, we're going to file some life bills, but it became this big omnibus, kind of not at the last minute, because going into session, we weren't talking about it. So it's really interesting how it all worked out. So
predicting the future is very tough. Ask the Loop Trolley.
Exactly.
So thank you for coming on. And one thing you mentioned Cook County and Illinois redistricting. People don't realize this, but I don't know why you would if you didn't live in Illinois, but they actually start the Illinois redistricting process off every 10 years. They take the Republican appointees and the Democrat appointees, and then they flip a coin to see who gets the tie-breaking vote. And then whoever wins the coin flip then just rams through their most partisan map because they have the tie-breaking vote based on a coin flip. And the crazy thing is, I'm not making that up. They actually, Jason Rosenbaum, the local journalist, can tell you all about this.
Awesome.
They actually flip a coin to determine Illinois redistricting balance of power. So
it kind of doesn't surprise me for some reason.
So we appreciate you coming today,
Thank you.
Representative Bailey. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Now we are going to have a member of the Democrat Party on to give a preview of the session as well before session starts. We don't have that set yet, but we're going to.
Good
deal. We want to get.
Are you going to give them the same good wine though?
Absolutely.
It's pretty good.
Absolutely. We'll see. Maybe beer or cocktails, depending on what they request.
See what the Loop.
You asked for red wine.
I did.
Give you red wine.
See what the Loop Trolley is serving, and that
would be great. So we will have a preview as well from a member of the other party. We're looking forward to that. And thank you for joining us on the Public Interest with David Stokes. Thank you for coming, Representative Bailey.
Thank you. Thanks so much.